louder? Okay. There's no other way to begin with but a Lynda word, greetings. Let's all say it together, shall we? Greetings. I have heard that word come out of Lynda's mouth, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of times. And every time she said it, I felt most welcome. And I hope that everyone here today, as well as those who are joining us online, feel that sense of welcome that only Lynda could offer. People of faith have responded to times like these with prayer always and forever. And among the many traditional prayers is a favorite of mine. It's a Hebrew prayer. And what is most interesting to me about this prayer is that there is no mention of death, although it is a prayer that is read when people are grieving. The prayer instead asks that God's name be magnified, that God's name be expanded, made holy. And I tell you this because one explanation for this very ancient and rooted prayer is that there is this sense that when a good person like Lynda dies, a beautiful person like Lynda dies, God is somehow diminished. Because within each and every one of us is a divine spark, a little bit of God. And with Lynda's death, that light has diminished. For some of us, that light has diminished greatly. And so the prayer invites those who grieve through their actions, and Lynda was a woman of action, to expand love, to expand the presence of God, and to expand goodness and beauty and wonder. In times like these, where we find ourselves in the valley of the shadow of death, as the psalmist told us, everything feels a little overwhelming. Maybe I'll just own that and say that for myself. When we must say goodbye for now. When we love deeply, we also hurt deeply when death comes. To love is to open ourselves to pain. What I witnessed in my relationship, my friendship with Lynda, was an ever-expanding love. And I wanted to speak to love just to begin with before reading one of Lynda's favorite poems. When I think of love now, I think of grief. And I think that each of us has to think about how we will grieve, and it won't be easy, and it won't be quick, and it will go through the seasons, and it will be with us always. But there is this beautiful academic that not too long ago, as I was accompanying Lynda, wrote this: "As you grieve, what does love look like for you? What does support look like for you right now?" I think love looks like many different things for us. But I pray that as we gather today, as we honor Lynda, that we will know with our actions, we will know with our own love light, that we will continue to expand love in her honor, and that we will feel her in our hearts and in our actions, but that we will also take care of ourselves, because grieving is hard. So remember to find love in beautiful places and with beautiful people as you mourn. One of the beautiful places that Lynda would go when she needed to know love was on a trail. Now I say that, Lynda was not a camper. Lynda was not gonna go on that trail and then pitch a tent for the night. But Lynda would go on those trails, and the poem that is in your bulletin is among Lynda's favorites. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locusts, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and they call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches, and they call again, "It's simple," they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. So in the spirit of expanding love, in the spirit of shining, Lynda's Advent wreath is at the front of the sanctuary. Lynda's Advent wreath is there just as it was there for us throughout the Advent season, where we listened and prayed together and reflected and heard beautiful music. And so today we are going to light the candles of hope, peace, joy, and love, and reflect on those insofar as they give us glimpses of Lynda. I forgot to mention, Lynda had Advent socks too. And I thought, no, Lynda wouldn't be happy if I brought her Advent socks. But what she would do is she'd layer them, and on Hope Sunday she'd wear her Hope socks, and then she'd wear Hope and Peace, and then she'd wear Hope, Peace, and Joy, and then Hope, Peace, and Love. So just by way of you knowing that Lynda would do exactly that. On New Year's Day, one of Lynda's favorite writers, Louise Penny, a fellow Quebecer, sent out her monthly newsletter. And the quote at the top caught me off guard completely. It read this way: "If it were not for hopes, the heart would break. If it were not for hopes, the heart would break." So I believe that hope requires lots of courage, and I witness that in Lynda every day. Lynda knew in her being, and I would never use that expression, that was another Lyndaism. In her being, she knew that true hope is not made out of certainty. It cannot be. True hope is fashioned and refashioned out of necessity. And Lynda did that all the time. Oh, she was brilliant at it. Lynda knew all about fear and all about hope. Hope in seeing the reality that was right in front of her and having the courage to keep going, to keep loving, to keep being Lynda. I can't even begin to describe the experience of hope we witnessed in her. After we planted bulbs and seeds, Lynda has over 3,000 pictures on her laptop, and most of them are the progression of beautiful bulbs and flowers growing. She took so many pictures and loved Mother Nature so much. Lynda asserted God's hopeful presence amidst everything she faced, and it was horrific what she faced. And just as Lynda needed hope every day, so do we as we grieve, as we honor, as we laugh, as we cry, and forever miss the sight of her, even though her presence will always be with us. As our Advent devotion reminded us, Advent hope is gritty. Hope in the face of impossibilities. Another favorite writer of Lynda said, whether it is a seed in the ground, a baby in the womb, or Jesus in the tomb, it starts in the dark. And so on December 3rd, Lynda and I sat in a darkened room and we lit the candle of hope. And here on January 4th, we do the same. When Lynda celebrated her covenanting service with the folks at St. John's United in Kemptville, and they are here with us today, she asked me to offer the message. And around that time, we had been reading an incredible book. It was one of those progression books where you couldn't move on to chapter 2 until you had done the work of chapter 1. But there was a chapter in there about feasting and celebrating, and like it was totally a chapter about Lynda and her life. And there was a story that I felt illustrated well what life with Lynda would be like in that community. If I remember the gospel story, that Sunday was about blindness, but this is about seeing. It's the story of a great writer who just happened to begin traveling, and she was in Switzerland with a beautiful, beautiful group of people, and they were having dinner. And I know so many of us can picture sitting around the table with Lynda, having a wonderful, wonderful meal. This author grew up in the land of teetotalers, did not drink wine in her family home, didn't know anything about the personal or social nuances of enjoying a glass of wine. And the owner of this tiny, what they described as an ancient little restaurant, served them a delicious stew and poured each of them a glass of their best vintage. I think at Lynda's covenanting, I said, best Welsh's grape juice, because that's United Churchy too, right? But as the story goes, they all clinked their glasses, and this woman who was not accustomed to a nice glass of wine went to down it like a glass of Kool-Aid, and this beautiful gentleman beside her took her arm and stopped her and said this: "That's not how you drink wine. You have to keep your glass up, and you have to look at everyone in the group. And I mean really look at them in the eyes and feel what they mean to you. Feel what they mean to you. And then once you have done that, then just take a small sip." I told the members of St. John's United and the Kemptville community that Lynda would indeed see them, that Lynda would hold her glass in front of her, and she would look at each and every one of them. She would know their names and their grandchildren's names, and she would accompany them in good times and in hard times. Lynda would always be present, and she would help them be radiant and shine God's love light as beloved kin. Today, in a way, we raise our glass and create sacred space and sacred time to truly feel and know what Lynda will always be for us. Because Lynda helped us love more. Lynda helped us to be good people, fun people, blessed people. Lynda's devotion to God, her care of her neighbor and friend and family and creation, it was always beautiful. There is a prayer in your bulletin. I would invite you to join with me in this prayer. It comes from the Prayer Bench, which is a resource from this Maritime Conference and Janice McLean. And Lynda wrote this prayer out by hand because it meant a lot to her during these last months. So let's join together and pray as Lynda did. May my grasping and yearning dissolve into stillness. May my fretting and thinking dissolve into silence. May my worries and fears dissolve into love. And may my soul forever rest in the mercy of your grace. Amen.
Psalm 139, verses 1-6 and 13-14. O Lord, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well.
Over the past 2 weeks, people have shared with us fond memories of Lynda. I would like to share with you a few of the many memories we have of Lynda as a special aunt, sister, and sister-in-law. Lynda took great joy in being present with her nieces and nephew whenever possible. As many of you know, Lynda loved to travel, or as Mom would say, she loved to run the roads. And she definitely did her fair share of running the roads to attend some of their special events. Going to New Jersey to be part of Paige's confirmation, trips to Toronto and Rhode Island to watch Harrison play hockey, trips to Halifax each summer to play Mary Poppins with Peyton, Lauren, and Katie, trips to Kingston to attend Peyton's sailing regattas, to Montreal to watch Lauren and Katie play basketball. And when Peyton and Lauren attended university in Ontario, she would visit them often, taking them to lunch and coffee, sometimes doing both in one day, picking up, delivering, and building IKEA furniture, doing Costco runs, and skating on the Rideau Canal together. And they had great comfort, as did I, in knowing that she was only a phone call and a short drive away if they ever needed anything. As a result of COVID and her health issues, she was unfortunately unable to meet her grandnephew Oliver in person. I know that was something she truly wished she could have done. But she did love being able to watch him grow through pictures and videos. Many of the phone calls I had with Lynda involved her excitedly reviewing pictures of Oliver that we regularly received from both Brenda or Paige. I was on my phone, she was on hers, and we were going through pictures. She loved that. Paige, Harrison, Peyton, Lauren, and Katie, Lynda's spirit lives on through you. Please never forget how proud Lynda was of you and how impressed she was of the women and the man that you have become. Distance did not stop Lynda from staying connected with family and maintaining meaningful, loving relationships. She did this primarily by phoning and texting regularly and often. And in recent years, she would use FaceTime or by sending cards, which she would make herself from beautiful pictures she had taken out in nature. Lynda called Osbert, Brenda, and I often to stay up to date on what was going on in everyone's lives. And if we weren't home, she would have great, maybe even better conversations with Pat, Sharon, and Gary. Sometimes the only way Brenda, Osbert, and I knew things about each other was through Lynda. She was a great listener and an advisor to us all. We will all greatly miss these moments of connection and those regular phone calls. Lynda loved giving unexpected gifts and very thoughtful gifts and shopping on Amazon. It got to the point where we had to be very careful what we told her sometimes, because within 3 days of that conversation, an Amazon package would arrive on our doorsteps. During COVID, I began doing puzzles and complained to Lynda about how leaning over the table was hurting my back. 3 days later, a fancy, more ergonomically correct puzzle board arrived at my door. I think it's safe to say, and I think they would agree, that without Lynda's generosity and encouragement, Osbert and Sharon would still be struggling with 21st century technology. Lynda embraced technology and really helped them learn how to use the iPad, get equipped with a smart TV, and the benefits of having an iPhone. This was also tied to her need for maintaining connections, and knew this would be important for them to stay connected with all of us. On one of Lynda's outings with Lynda, or Lauren's outings with Lynda, Lauren, who had just moved into a house in Ottawa, told Lynda, "I'm going to have to get a shovel for the winter." As soon as they got back to Lauren's, Lynda jumped out of the car, went to the trunk, grabbed a new shovel she had just purchased for herself, and handed it to Lauren and said, "Here you go." And Paige remembers on one of Lynda's visits going shopping and looking at books, and particularly one book, which Lynda noticed and ended up going back and purchasing for her. It ended up being one of Paige's favorite books. Lynda loved to make people laugh, could be mischievous, and was always up for adventures. Many of you may have seen pictures in the video played before the service of Lynda as a clown in yellow grass at the Canada Day Parade, rocking it out in our kitchen or on her drum set, and balancing a tray of sandwiches in the hall on her head. Lynda and I were only 2 years apart, and while we were no Thelma and Louise or Bonnie and Clyde, we did get ourselves in trouble sometimes when left to our own devices. Running up the grocery tab at Gerald Dow's store with pop and chip purchases after school each day. I'm sure that was her idea, not mine. Until Mom wondered why the bill was about $100 more one month. Or playing on the ride-on lawnmower and accidentally flipping it upside down with me on it. And spinning out on a piece of ice and ending up in a snowbank, which we could drive out of, on our way to ski at St. Edgore. And us thinking, Mom and Dad would never find out. Turns out we were quite wrong. One of Lynda's adventures that caused great anxiety and stress for both Mom and Brenda was a close call days before Brenda and Gary's wedding, when Lynda and Gary had a close call with whirlpools when they were canoeing on the Gascabedia River. They were much later getting back than expected, and everyone was getting very, very nervous. When they arrived back, both of them were so thrilled and excited about the adventure. And in the end, they were glad that the only negative result of their mishap was that Lynda had lost her glasses. Needless to say, Mom was not too impressed. They thought it was funny, though, and would joke, it could have been 2 funerals instead of a wedding that weekend. And the final memory I want to share of Lynda is the incredible strength, courage, and grace Lynda exhibited during her illness. We never heard Lynda complain. She always had hope, developed a persevering mindset, and held on to her faith. There is no other way to describe it. Her strength was truly remarkable. To close, Lynda loved order, disliked clutter, and for anyone who visited her home knew that she had a spot for everything. So, in keeping with Lynda's spirit of order, I would place these memories and the many other memories we all have in special spots in our hearts, under the following characteristics that made Lynda, Lynda with a Y. She was generous, thoughtful, funny, mischievous, personable, and so strong. We love you, Lynda, and we'll miss you so much.
As with the scripture lessons, the hymns were ones that Lynda chose. And so we'll join together to sing our first hymn, which is "In the Bulb There Is a Flower." And if you do want to look it up in the hymn book, it's number 703, but it's also in your bulletin.
Promise
so our second candle on our Advent wreath is the candle of peace. And the work of peace is daring, and it is never easy. Lynda knew that, especially in these past 4 years. I would include all of those 4 years. A state of being present, practices every single day for Lynda. Lynda showed us that it was possible, amidst this tough stuff of life, to allow God's peace, God's wholeness in mind, in body, and spirit to embrace us, to calm us, to release our fears, even if it was only for a moment, and to remember to allow God's goodness and mercy to meet us where we are. You know, in the 23rd Psalm, it reads, "Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." But in the original Hebrew, it's more like pursue me. Goodness and mercy shall pursue me all the days of my life. But what I found in these past 4 years is that Lynda didn't make God pursue her, literally chase after her. Lynda paused often. Lynda found a way to allow God's goodness and mercy and peace to enter her everyday life. And this is the way she did it. Through the gift of prayer, through walking and cycling, especially her fold-up bicycle. Oh man, did she love that bike. There's lots of images of it. Being out among the trees. Hers was a discipline that was cultivated daily. Finding deep connection, meditating. Lynda's sabbatical offered her wave after wave of beautiful grace and peace. Spiritual direction became part of her daily life as she enjoyed her sabbatical. Every day, Lynda would listen to Daily Calm, and she would learn to be present in that moment. And when her mind would wander and be filled with fear, she'd just bring herself back to the present moment. No more, no less, in God's beautiful presence. Around Remembrance Day, so not too far away from Lynda's birthday, we would often find ourselves turning in Voices United to number 683, where there is an affirmation of peace. And we would share these words: "Peace is the generous, tranquil contribution of all to the good of all. Peace is dynamism. Peace is generosity." And doesn't that just sound like Lynda? There are trees who grow to be hundreds of feet tall. And even though Lynda's a tree hugger in one of her pictures, no one person could get their arms around these trees, these giant, ancient redwood trees. And Lynda and I read a story. We saw this story. It came from a national park in the United States. And so many people asked how in the world these trees could face all the challenges that they did with weather and conditions and decade after decade and still thrive. Well, this little sign told us. These giant redwoods, their root systems would spread out and attach themselves to the root system of the tree beside them, and the tree beside them, and beside them. And they literally held each other so that they could thrive and not merely survive. I feel that way with Lynda, that we could connect and hold each other, and still in the midst of so much, thrive. And so Brenda and Gary are going to come forward and light the peace candle, and then we'll hear of vines and branches and vital connection. No lone ranger, and Lynda was not a lone ranger. A profound interdependence growing into and around each other. Lynda chose the gospel lesson as well, John 15, and went as far as to say to me, Christine, from the Message, thank you very much. And so there it is. Would you join with me if you feel comfortable? It's right there in your bulletin. We will have it in 2 parts, and then we'll sing in between. Let's join together. I am the real vine, and my Father is the farmer. He cuts off every branch of me that doesn't bear grapes, and every branch that is grape-bearing, he prunes back so it will bear even more. You are already pruned back by the message I have spoken. Live in me. Make your home in me just as I do in you. In the same way that a branch can't bear grapes by itself, but only by being joined to the vine, you can't bear fruit unless you are joined with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing. Anyone who separates from me is dead wood, gathered up and thrown into the bonfire. But if you make yourselves at home with me, and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who he is, when you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples. So I have to say, whenever I hear in the garden, I hear your mother. I hear Mrs. Harrison playing this on the pump organ, on the piano, on the organ, and it'll be beautiful for all of us to join together to sing in the garden. So if you can keep your bulletins open, we'll continue reading that beautiful passage from John's Gospel that Lynda just loved. Let's join together. I've loved you the way my Father has loved me. Make yourselves at home in my love. If you keep my commands, you'll remain intimately at home in my love. That's what I've done, kept my Father's commands and made myself at home in his love. I've told you these things for a purpose, that my joy might be your joy, and your joy wholly mature. This is my command. Love one another the way I loved you. This is the very best way to love. Put your life on the line for your friends. You are my friends when you do the things I command you. I am no longer calling you servants, because servants don't understand what their master is thinking and planning. No, I've named you friends because I've let you in on everything I've heard from the Father. So words of joy come easy, and this is actually our longest section, mostly because God's joy was inside of Lynda's veins. Lynda the adventurer, Lynda ready, set, go, the cheerleader, an enthusiast par excellence, a chef, and there are sous chefs here today, a hostess with the mostess, a mover and a shaker, the CEO of Lynda's Moving and Organization Incorporated, a curator of beauty, a daytime trekker, a super shopper. Man, could Lynda find deals. Oh my goodness. I know one of my brothers for sure is watching today, and he would call Lynda and say, Lynda, I'm looking to get thus and so. I'm on it, she'd say. A wordsmith. Litanies that were beautiful in the sanctuary and spectacular on the golf course. Lynda's favorite occupation, I don't know if all of you know this, but her favorite occupation, a radio announcer. And I think during COVID, a lot of her fellow ministers felt like radio announcers. Lynda loved it. Every Christmas, we went to listen to a radio announcer, Stuart McLean, and the Vinyl Cafe Christmas. Our joy story comes from a sad time, though, because Stuart McLean became very ill and was no longer able to host. And we decided that while he was receiving his treatment, that we should hold up the love light, and we had our own Vinyl Cafe Christmas. The Hummingbirds, who are a group of singers in Kempville, came and sang to us. We ate together, and Lynda prepared the story exchange. This is the sanitized version. Greetings, Stuart. Attending your Christmas program has become a treasured and most anticipated oasis in the midst of the hustle and bustle of the Christmas season. As Christmas approaches, I'm reminded of an important lesson that a 3-year-old taught me when I was living in Saskatchewan. After the Christmas Eve services, I ventured to Gravelbourg to spend Christmas with them. I arrived after Margaret was in bed, and in the morning, Margaret didn't rush out into the living room to see what Santa had left her. Instead, she walked down the stairs yelling, "Owinda, Owinda, where are you?" Of course, this memory warms my heart, but it also reminds me of the importance of focusing on the people around us rather than all the fuss and the muss that can come with Christmas. I learned many valuable lessons while in ministry in Saskatchewan. I lived in the town of 547 people in Yellowgrass and had the pleasure of learning about life on the prairies. And I will never forget one event-filled Sunday afternoon that started off with an invitation to lunch at Blaine and Laurie's. Lunch conversation with Blaine and Laurie and Myrna and George was always quite animated, filled with laughter and storytelling. Blaine, knowing that I enjoyed learning about farming, especially grain farming — Lynda was not a fan of the critters — always keen to engage in conversation about farming too, he decided to invite me outside to witness AIing, artificial insemination, for any of you that doesn't resonate with. George said, "Lynda, you might need to take some Gravol for this adventure because you might get queasy watching all that AIing." And I said, "No, I'll be fine." I had gone to the steer farm that day for lunch, not anticipating that I would be venturing out into the yard, so I was ill-prepared with respect to my footwear. I was presented with a pair of men's size 10, and I wore 7.5 women's. It's going to get good. Blaine and I set off across the farmyard to fetch Phantom the cow, with the objective of relocating Phantom to the barn for the procedure. After surveying the distance between the location where Phantom was and the barn, I opted for a shortcut, striking out on my own rather than following Blaine and Phantom, my reasoning that I wasn't particularly enjoying the trek through the mud, stuff, and water. Unfortunately, I hadn't surveyed the terrain very carefully because I found myself getting stuck in that mud, stuff, and water. Blaine wasn't at all aware that I had opted for an alternate route until he realized I wasn't responding to his comments, at which point he turned around only to discover me stranded, not able to move. "Lynda, what are you doing there?" he exclaimed. Then he gave me instructions to slide my feet forward rather than trying to take strides in the usual way. While this sliding technique worked, I was able to move ahead a couple of steps, but on the third slide, my foot came right out of the boot, at which point I lost my balance and fell backwards, landing in a sitting position in the mud, stuff, and water. Let me tell you, this was quite a sight. Blaine knew from the expression on my face that I was horrified. Bless his heart, he didn't laugh at me, but hurried over to help me. I was wishing that I had the ability to levitate and that I would not have to put my hands down on that ground to stand up. I was so embarrassed with falling, and I declined Blaine's offer of assistance. There's Lynda not paying attention to John 15 and interdependence. And I just used my hands to push myself up. After sitting in the mud, stuff, and water, watching the AIing procedure was an absolute breeze. A couple of lessons learned that afternoon: always carry your own rubber boots in the car, and follow the people who know the terrain. And all of you can guess how Lynda signed off that note to Stuart McLean. Blessings, Lynda Harrison. Lauren and Katie are going to come forward to light the candle of joy. Every night, our devotions included the Lord's Prayer, and we will be saying the Lord's Prayer soon. But just a couple of nights before Lynda's death, we decided that we would affirm our faith with the words of the Creed, and they are there in your bulletin, and I would encourage you to join with me in these words. We are not alone. We live in God's world. We believe in God, who has created and is creating, who has come in Jesus, the Word made flesh, to reconcile and make new, who works in us and others by the Spirit. We trust in God. We are called to be the church, to celebrate God's presence, to live with respect in creation, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope, in
we've come round to the candle of love. My name is Heather McDougall, and Pix and I, who you will hear a bit later, have been friends of Lynda's for many years and colleagues. And I'm just going to name Christine Lawson since you didn't introduce yourself. So that has been Christine, who has been leading us, and many family members who have participated. It's not difficult to focus on love when talking about Lynda. There is love in this church, and there's love from people in many provinces who are joining us online. Saskatchewan and Ontario, including people who are gathering right now at St. John's United in Kemptville. People in Quebec, Maritimes, and Newfoundland, and those are just the few places I know of. It is Lynda who has brought us here, and all of us have experienced being loved by Lynda and loving her. Lynda's love expanded, as Christine said, and I kind of envision circles of love. There was the love of her parents and her siblings, and Lisa shared some of those stories of family bonding. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the hardware store and how later in life we couldn't drive with Lynda past a Rona without us all going, Rona, Rona. So a little advertisement for Rona. Lynda's circle expanded as she grew to friends in school and university. The circles expanded in her ministry with so many people and congregations across the land. Circles continued to grow as she welcomed the in-laws into the family. And I think one of the largest circles in her life was when the young ones began to come along. Paige and Harrison, who we don't know personally, but we know from stories and pictures. Margaret, you and Lynda became family in Saskatchewan, and that has continued throughout your life in Ontario and the townships, and now with your own family. Peyton, Katie, and Lauren, you were blessed with having Mary Poppins for many summers, as Lynda was your summer nanny. And we got to meet you in those early years and continue to learn and know about you as your lives have unfolded. And now the circle continues with another generation. There's Oliver, there's Landon and Lex. Lynda's circles of love and family grew and expanded with each passing year. And all of us gathered here and those gathered online are part of that expanding love. We've heard already many words about Lynda and the common themes that have come through from people writing online and talking with people and been expressed here. Lynda's beautiful smile, her kindness, ever so kind, people say, her laughter and wit, her incredible memory, her caring heart. And to all of that, Pix and I would say amen as well, and add a few other memories. Her yearly visits to us in PEI after we moved back to the Maritimes, the many beach walks, and a few lobster feeds. And usually when we had lobster, we would always have Bruce's coleslaw. Lynda would make it. We remember Lynda's great sense of fun and adventure that was already mentioned, her many trips everywhere. And the one trip that I remember, I wasn't on it, was flying in a helicopter over the Grand Canyon. That was pretty adventuresome. Lynda drove every vehicle she could and drove everywhere she could. Spontaneously, just picking up and driving 3 hours to see somebody, to drop off something, and drive home. Part of that generosity that Lisa talked about. One of the other gifts that I have experienced in Lynda and will remember always is the gift of gratitude. It was always present in her being, and especially in these last 4 years, and even more so if that was possible this last year. Her gratitude for life and care is what grounded her. She was so grateful to all the medical staff and would express that gratitude to them. Lots of us have experience of maybe complaining about staff, and we express that pretty easily. But Lynda expressed her deep gratitude to them. I don't know anyone else who writes a letter to her dentist to thank him for his diligence and action, which led to her diagnosis of cancer. I don't know anyone else who in the operating room before her 12-hour surgery asks the surgical team if she can pray for them. And she did. And she told them that others were praying for them, for their skills and their work across the country. Lynda was truly amazing in how she faced her cancer diagnosis and all the multitude of treatments that followed. She was grateful to all who were holding her, walking with her, loving her as she made this journey. Family, friends, faith communities. And she was so grateful to you, Christine and Richard and Margaret, as you were steadfast in your love and friendship and caregiving. As I was preparing for today, I was reminded of some words from Scripture, where the writer is talking about fruits of the Spirit. And he said, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. So many of those attributes were lived by Lynda. And then I read these words in another translation, that Message translation of the Bible. And I invite you to hear these. But what happens when we live God's ways? God brings gifts into our lives, much the same way the fruit appears in an orchard. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity. We develop a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, but able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. Lynda shared all of these gifts, and I think encourages us to keep living this way, to keep expanding our circles of love. And as we light the candle of love, and that will be Margaret and Christine. as we light this candle, we remember that love knows no bounds in life and in death and in life beyond death. May we always hallow and treasure so great a love. And we have an opportunity to sing another one of Lynda's favorite hymns, Here I Am, Lord.
Aware of the time, but can we just take a lead, I think, from Marilyn and take a breath? We just have a few more moments. My name is Pix Butt, and Heather's partner and friend of Lynda's. I seem to be the one who will be the teary one here at the microphone today. I'm amazed when people can speak like that without tears. But that's okay, I can add a few for all of you. As was mentioned, Lynda, in her sabbatical, delved into spiritual practice, spiritual deepening, spiritual listening. And so in our prayers of consolation today, I want us to take some time to be quiet with ourselves. We've had a lot of memories. We've had some laughs. We've all had some tears. And what will give us consolation today will be different for each one of us. But the beginning of that consolation, that comfort, that how do we get through this, the beginning of that really begins within our own hearts, our own willingness to listen, to hear our own heart beat, to be filled with gratitude, to connect with the divine spark which is in each one of us. My own belief of when we end our life here is that we live on. Science tells us we are made of energy, and energy does not end. And energy seeks out energy. Lynda is with us in this place, and will be with us on the beach and in the woods and on the walks and in the memories that we hold. Let us allow our own hearts to be consoled, our own spirits to be stirred. We're just going to hold a few moments of silence. Let our hearts listen together. May each one find your own way of consolation. May each one of us not be shy to seek out what we need for consolation. And may each one of us find a way to be open to that loving consolation and spirit presence that is promised to us. Let us continue to hold this kind of sacred time that we've held here today over the next weeks and months, as long as it takes. Be gentle with ourselves. Be gentle with each other as we walk together our prayers of consolation. Another book that Lynda really appreciated, and we do as well, is called Circles of Grace by Jan Richardson. I just want to share some of these words with you. Do not leave without hearing who you are. Beloved, named by the one who has traveled this path before you and is with you always. I cannot promise this blessing will free you from danger, but I can tell you that on this path there is help. I can tell you that you will know the strange graces that come to our aid, and with their curious insistence will whisper our names. We will hear it deep within our own being. Beloved, beloved, beloved. Let us share together words that most of us have learned from childhood, passed on to us from generation to generation of people who have named themselves of followers of Jesus' way. Let us say that prayer together. Our Father, Mother, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
The last candle, the final candle, the Christ candle, which in many churches is lit on Christmas Eve, and many churches light a Christ candle every Sunday to symbolize the light of Christ. Let us listen to these words from the beginning of John's Gospel. The Word was first, the Word present to God, God present to the Word. The Word was God, in readiness for God from day one. Everything was created through him. Nothing, not one thing, came into being without him. What came into existence was life, and the life was the light to live by. The life light blazed out of the darkness. The darkness couldn't put it out. Thank you for joining me. The life light blazes within each of us and among us. Just before our closing hymn, just a couple of words to share. First of all, thanks to Pierre, to the session, and to all those from St. Andrews who have enabled us to be here today and to share in this celebration for Lynda's life. Following the service, the committal will take place at Black Cape Cemetery. People are invited to come there, but if you choose not to come, you are invited to go out into the hall and to begin to share in refreshments. Now, I know this is unusual. People usually want to wait till the family comes back. But I'm just speaking the words that the family has asked me to speak, that they would very much appreciate if you begin tea and coffee and goodies, and they will join you when we return. And so to that end, let us just share a word of grace. Creating God, as we share food and stories around tables, may we be nourished in body and soul. May we be surrounded by your love and grace. Blessed is this food, and blessed are our lives and our love. Amen. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, our final hymn.
Thou art mighty, hold me with thy
The blessing is printed in the bulletin. This was a blessing given to Lynda the night before her surgery in July. But I think it is a blessing now that we offer to one another as we leave this place. I would invite us to share in this blessing responsively so we can offer it to each other. I will begin with the first line. You folks join in the second, and we'll continue responsively. Deep peace of the gentle waves to you.
Deep peace of the dancing clouds to you.
Deep peace of the steady rock to you.
Deep peace of the ones who walk with you.
Deep peace of the setting sun to you.
Deep peace of the God who cradles you.
Deep peace of all that brings peace to you. And to all of us, may it be so. Amen.